so let's talk about the tight ends here, and let's start with Travis Kelce. The question du jour, gentlemen, is where are we taking Travis Kelce in round one? Jamie, I'll start with you.
I think the earliest you could consider taking him is, right around 6th overall. You start to just look at what he is and what he has been, hopefully what will still be. I don't really care so much about his golf swing, Tommy. I just want him to keep catching touchdowns and being the guy for Patrick Mahomes. We know that receiving core in Kansas City is very stripped down right now. We'll hopefully get Kadarius Toney back for week 1. But when you're talking about Sky Moore stepping up and Rashee Rice becoming something as a rookie, this connection is what you're looking at for Patrick Mahomes and clearly for Travis Kelce to be the star of stars among a very thin position traditionally. So if you want to get that positional advantage, you take him in the middle of the first round and you don't think twice.
Yeah, I've got him at number 7. I think where it really gets tough is when you're comparing him to Austin Eckler, you're comparing him to Stephon Diggs, you're comparing him to Cooper Kupp. I'm definitely going to take McCaffrey, Chase, Jefferson, Tyreek Hill ahead of him. But really, the hard thing is, 34 years old, we know Father Time's undefeated. At some point, the cliff is coming. We also know that last year was one of the best years of his entire career, so it's hard to say that cliff is coming this year.
It's also interesting, too, if philosophically you like to lock away the tight end, which is usually one slot, you don't have to worry about it. But I was just talking to both of you guys about typically in years past, even when he's been great, 10, 11, 12 has certainly been the case. You guys are much higher. Now, does that have to do with the lack of maybe potential positions ahead, running backs or maybe high-end wide receiver ones?
That's part of it, I think. I think the other part of it is, last year we thought, well, Mark Andrews isn't that bad of a consolation prize. We take Mark Andrews in round 2, we'll be okay. Mark Andrews was a long, long way from Travis Kelce. There's nobody even close to this guy. The positional advantage feels even bigger than it did going into last year.
And it's easy to look at the tiers at the other positions, too. Cooper Kupp, because of the hamstring injury, is falling down a little bit. Stephon Diggs, I think, may have hit his ceiling, so you kind of know what you're getting. So I don't know if taking him versus Travis Kelce makes a lot of sense. And then the running backs are starting to fall off a little bit. When you don't have Jonathan Taylor and Josh Jacobs locked in, which could be first-round picks. Derrick Henry at 29 years old, you worry about him at, Kelce at 34. Henry at 29 feels like he's got an AARP card at this point, So these guys are falling into round 2, which makes it just, okay, what's the safe route plus the upside? You get that both with Travis Kelce.
Heath, you mentioned the gap. You mentioned Mark Andrews. So where are we targeting the Baltimore tight end, you think?
It's definitely round 3. We're done with round 2, Mark Andrews. And you see him fall in round 4 occasionally. If you get that, it's an absolute gift. Any time really after that 2-3 turn when we see guys like Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Chris Olave, those young wide receivers go, when they're all gone, I start looking for Mark Andrews.
It's also before the running back group, too, where it starts with kind of Joe Mixon, but Mixon, Jahmyr Gibbs, Aaron Jones, Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, there's a lot of uncertainty with those guys, a lot of upside as well. But I think, again, you just sort of say, okay, what have I done? And typically it's what have I done early in round 1. So if you get one of those top-tier wide receivers, whether it's Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, or you go the Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler route, it gives you, again, that safe option. But there's a lot of changes in Baltimore. I mean, we know the offense is changing. Todd Monken there. Are they going to lean on Mark Andrews as much with a more robust receiving core because Zay Flowers, first-round pick, Rashad Bateman coming back, clearly Odell Beckham there, and a better Lamar Jackson. So I still think Andrews is the best of that receiving core when you factor in all those wide receivers, but is he that much of a standout over those guys, which is why he's now falling into round 3 in terms of Mark Andrews' value.
All right, so let's get to a comparison, and let's go with Darren Waller and Dallas Goedert. Waller, for a year or two, is top 3 conversation for tight end. He's got a new team, obviously. Jamie, I'll start with you. How high are you on Darren Waller versus Dallas Goedert?
Yeah, back at number 3 for me. And, it's ahead of T.J. Hawkinson as well, and even Kyle Pitts, which I think I'm going against the grain a little bit because most people are leaning toward those guys. And I get it. Look, I think once you get past the top 2 guys, that next tier, which factors in George Kittle as well, is really Andrews, Hawkinson, Pitts, Goddard, and Kittle. But for me, I look at Darren Waller and what he should be able to do if he's healthy. That's the biggest question. Can he stay healthy? And I'm banking on him, new team, being rejuvenated a little bit and being with a quarterback that will hopefully lean on. The Giants offense is desperate for a playmaker in the passing game. We saw this last year where Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins and Guy, and they just bring in, a bunch of slot receivers now. And so it's this giant among little men running around the middle of the field. I think Darren Waller is going to be a big favorite for Daniel Jones. And I think everybody looks at Brian Daboll and says, okay, Buffalo, they didn't really use the tight end very much. His history suggests that they have. He used to coach tight ends, was with the Patriots during the Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez days. I think that speaks to what they looked for this offseason to get that type of playmaker. Darren Waller's going to have a big year.
Yeah, I think the injuries are a concern with Waller. Listen, I think we're all about the same place on Dallas Goedert. Tight end 5 through 7, somewhere around 6. This is the one we're debating is Darren Waller, and it's injuries, it's age. He's 31 years old now. He's missed 14 games over the last 2 seasons, but it's also a situation. It's not just the head coach, it's the quarterback. Daniel Jones hasn't thrown for more than 3,200 yards ever in his career, hasn't thrown for more than 15 touchdown passes since his rookie year, and he is fantastic as a rusher. So are the Giants suddenly going to let Daniel Jones throw more? Is he going to suddenly have a prolific season as a passer? I don't really think so. So with concerns about the health, the age, the quarterback, the offensive system, I don't really want to draft Darren Waller.
To be fair to Daniel Jones, he's never had a talent like this to throw to. So we've seen what that means for these quarterbacks when they get that type of receiving threat. That typically is when their passing numbers change. Will that happen for Daniel Jones? We'll find out. That's what I'm banking on.
And I think that's the healthy debate, right? The concerns are valid, but we've seen the upside, especially out in Vegas for Darren Waller, and I think that's the conversation that we're having now. So another popular...
Did you make a Raiders reference? That's unlike you.
Oh, I just tried to sneak it in there. I didn't put a Derek Carr reference in there, though. That wasn't planned, but now I just did. So we talk about mid to late. Again, philosophically, people want to go with other positions, and then the big 2 or 3 tight ends are off the board. They want someone with a little bit of value, maybe a guy that'll pop. Jamie, do you have one in mind?
I'm going to take the rookie in Buffalo. I think you look at Dalton Kincaid, the fact that the Bills traded up in the first round to go get him, he's different than something that they have right now. And I know Dawson Knox has been good, but he hasn't been great. And so when you look at the Buffalo Bills receiving core, Stephon Diggs is the star. Gabe Davis is the question mark, but he's more of just the home run threat. Who's the guy that's been making plays in training camp and a guy that they're going to feature, I think, and that's going to be Dalton Kincaid. And so a good approach you could take is you could even bypass some of these tight ends that you see ranked ahead of him, starting with maybe Pat Freiermuth, but I think Freiermuth has some upside. But the Evan Ingrams, the David Njokus, the guys that are maybe have a little bit of a cap ceiling, you take the rookie a little bit sooner than those guys, and then you almost double tap the position. You come back and you get the veteran guy. So I did that in a draft over the weekend. I took Dalton Kincaid first. I came back and I took Dalton Schultz a little bit later, next round, right after, as a matter of fact. And now I have the security blanket if Kincaid doesn't pop. But if he does, I'm going to have maybe a top 7, 8 tight end, and I think that's pretty special with what he can be.
And I'm cheating because right now, according to CBS ADP, Kyle Pitts going in round 7. And that's the guy who would make me say, okay, if I can really get Pitts in round 7, I don't want to draft Mark Andrews in round 3 because Pitts could have that type of upside. Last year was a disaster for him, but we still saw him averaging a 28% target per route run rate. That is incredible for a wide receiver. For a tight end, it's just about unheard of. If Desmond Ridder can just be okay as a quarterback, we could see Pitts finally justify the round 3 ADP that he's had each of the last 2 years. Only this year you get him in round 6 or round 7.
Tommy, I just want to bring up real quick because you did start the segment about George Kittle.
Thank you. I was going to follow with that real quick.
Why he's not there.
Yeah,
I think he's falling. If he falls to a spot that's a good value, you pounce on it. And I think that's the difference between analyst drafts right now and non-analyst drafts, the novice drafts that we're seeing. Because Kittle, like on our ADP on CBS Sports, is the number 2 tight end, which is just ridiculous. He should not be drafted that high. As great as he has been, the numbers with Brock Purdy last year, very different when it was with Deebo Samuel and without Deebo Samuel. But if you get him after this group, after the top 5 tight ends, and even factor in Dallas Goedert, the top 6 tight ends, I think that's the perfect spot to target George Kittle because still will retain some good value. Just hard to expect that elite level production that we've seen for the majority of his career because, again, a lot of mouths to feed in San Francisco.
Final word, Heath, on that. George Kittle.
I'm scared when everybody's healthy, but the great thing about that situation in San Francisco is it's been very rare that everybody's been healthy. So I do agree, like if Deebo goes down, then I think Kittle spikes. If Brandon Ayuk goes down, Kittle spikes. If McCaffrey has problems, Kittle spikes. If everybody's healthy, what we saw last year with Brock Purdy is that Kittle was the guy whose targets really suffered. He was below 40 yards in 6 of his final 8 games. So there is a real concern when everybody's healthy.